So my name is Mark, and I'm a drug addict and alcoholic.
Hey, Mark.
Lisa's my wife, by the way. Just so it's clear. My sobriety date is April 29th, 2020. My sponsor is Johnny T. I have an active sponsor, and I work with guys when they ask me, when I go through the steps. I've been taught that's kind of how I introduce myself when I come to speak to groups. So I'm going to talk today about a little bit about what it was like, what happened, what it was like, what happened, what it was like, what happened, because it's not a continuous line. So I grew up in Montana because my parents were in prison when I was a kid for drugs. So I was never going to drink or use. And I made it till I was 19. And then as soon as I took that first drink, I got that immediate sense of ease and comfort that it talks about in the book. I was accepted, I was funny, I was likable, I had friends, and I always felt like I was alone and different and I wasn't the same. But I also lost cars and girlfriends and jobs and my sanity almost immediately when I started to drink. And I'm not going to talk too much about that first bout of drinking, which went on for about 8 years, other than when I started to drink, I had no idea what was going to happen. Sometimes I could stop. Sometimes it was normal. Sometimes I woke up in another state with a woman I didn't know having bought a house. True story. So honestly, it just was a crapshoot. So I will say the consistency in my life got really, really small. My family just didn't want to have that much to do with me. I had almost no friends, and I couldn't get a girl. I really desperately wanted a girlfriend, but I couldn't figure out how to make that relationship thing work. So when I got my second DWI in 1995 and they referred me into deferred prosecution, it was a godsend. I didn't fight it. I went into AA willingly, and I got that same sense of ease and comfort when I walked into Abigail's Ghost on East Lake. I was accepted. I was liked. People listened to me. They applauded when I said I had 30 days. They invited me to do things. I had friends. And life got really good. I did the work. I got a sponsor. I got a girlfriend, I got a wife, I got all the gifts that we think we're going to get, all the cash and prizes, if you will, when you come in. So when I look back 5 or 6 years later, I was married. I had a great career instead of a job, a nicer house, a better car, things. I had guys that I was sponsoring. Life was going really well. And it went on that way for a while. We had a couple kids. And sometime I think it was about year 10, I got really frustrated with the program, and I don't know why. I got really full of myself, full of about how successful I was really into the fact that I was self-made. I didn't go to college. I'd made myself successful professionally without a degree, and I stopped going to meetings. And after a while, I started to really resent meetings. And I had a wife that I met in the program who was sober, and we were raising our kids in the sober house. And I just checked out. I would go to one AA retreat every year and about 2 or 3 meetings, and then I'd go get my coin. And that went on until about 2014. In 2013, I had a couple surgeries. And at the end of 2013, after the second surgery, I relapsed on my pain meds. And if you've got any, I know this is the AA meeting, but if you've got a question about whether the pain meds are tricky, like whether it's a relapse or not, there are 2 tests. One is your name on the bottle. And the second is route of ingestion. So if you're snorting or otherwise taking those pills in, it's probably not okay. And I immediately got bit with that same passion for that sense of ease and comfort that was all of a sudden back. I wasn't angry anymore because I'd become a very angry husband and a very angry dad and a very angry coworker. And I couldn't figure out why. And all of a sudden, I wasn't. And I wanted more of that. And I quickly exhausted the meds that the doc would prescribe me. And it made perfect sense that I would just, after coaching my kids' softball game or doing what I do, I just go down to Aurora and look for people to sell me drugs. And that went on for about 5 or 6 months. And it was kind of nightmarish. And there was nothing that was off the table for me. I'd do anything because I wanted to feel different. I was chasing. It wasn't so much more. It was just chasing that feeling of different. I didn't like who I was, and I wanted to feel different. And so in July of that year, I had a car accident. And as a result of the car accident, my wife took me to the hospital and found all the drugs that I had. and reminded me of a promise I'd made to her, 18 years earlier, that if one of us relapsed, would agree to go to treatment. And I said, okay, I've done this before. I'll do that. And so a few days later, I trottled off to Hazelden, Springbrook, Betty Ford down in Oregon. And I was there for 60 days and I cleaned up. I stopped using the drugs, but I didn't get any of the relief that I got the first time through. None of it. I was angry and I was miserable and I wanted to desperately feel different again. That's all I could focus on. And I was the worst inpatient patient you could imagine, because I was quick to remind every counselor that came in to talk to me how I had more time 6 months ago than they have currently. I knew more about the program than I'd forgotten more than they knew. I was a terrible patient. So I got out, and believe it or not, with an attitude like that, I didn't make it very long. And I relapsed a couple months in, didn't tell anybody, relapsed again, didn't tell anybody. And finally, I gave up at about 6 months. And the solution for me, after having given up, was I was just going to fake it. I knew I needed to go to a meeting because I had to make my wife think that I was sober. And I knew I had certain things I had to do, but I was just going to use and feel differently. And I'd figure out the right balance. I'd figure out a way to make it work. Didn't matter how long I'd been in the program, watching all of us come in and out and seeing that doesn't work. But that's what I did. And I did that for about 750 days. And and my routine was the same. So I would get up about 5:30 or 6 in the morning, get right with, figure out where I was first, which is always fun to do. Then I would go find whatever I needed to use so I would feel okay. Then I would get in the car and I would go to an AA meeting that I made sure my wife knew that I was there. So people would say they saw me at the meeting, and I would talk to people. Then I would go to the work and I would use all day long while I was working. And work was the one thing that was successful. And that's what I hung my hat on. Everything else in my life was failing. Everything else was completely unmanageable and out of control, but work was okay. And so at the end of the day, I would come home and I would have 3 or 4 really, really miserable hours with my family where I had to be straight. And then once everybody went to bed, I would hole up in the bathroom and I would use until 2 or 3 in the morning, roll into bed for 2 or 3 fitful hours of sleep, wake up and do it all over again. I didn't want to go on a vacation. I didn't want to go out of town for work necessarily. I didn't want to do anything that messed up that routine, because that was what was working for me. So I was so messed up in my head. That was manageable. That routine, that was happiness for me. That's as good as I thought it was going to get. So fast forward to 2017, it's the umpteenth time where my wife has found my stuff and I'm lying and saying it's not mine or whatever, in the house. And there was a point, and I don't know why I did it, but I just came clean. And I said, "You're right. I haven't been sober pretty much a day in the last couple of years. I don't know what to do. I need help." And God bless my wife. She said she was sympathetic, and that's great. And over the next week, we decided that I did need help and I was going to have to go get it on my own. And I couldn't live there anymore. And I needed that. I desperately needed to be told I had to go figure this out on my own. I wasn't going to be able to be supported and be in the house. And that was the beginning for me. And so I got a sponsor who was one of the guys that I was pretending to be sober with my men's meeting that I would go to, who was also a good friend of mine. And he helped me rewrite some of the steps so that I could do them. Because I had no problem with step 1. My life was unmanageable and out of control, and I accepted that was easy. What I did not believe, and I just couldn't get over, was that my life could get better, that this program could work for me. Because in my mind, I'd been around too long. I'd seen too many people. I knew how this thing worked, and it wasn't going to work for me. And so he asked me the question. He said, "If you believed it would work, what would you do? Let's just pretend for a moment you think this can help you, what would you do?" And I said, "I'd meet with you. I'd go through the steps. I'd do the program. I'd go to the work." Well, let's just pretend. And what it ended up being was acting as if. Because that second step, it doesn't say that we believe, it says we came to believe. And that means over time, we come to believe. We don't believe it. We don't have to get there before we can go on and do the rest of the work. So the other one that I had a problem with was step 3. And step 3 was really boiled down to something that was really simple for me. And it was turned into, instead of a God step, it became a control step. The illusion of control. I believed that I had control over outcomes. And that when I would do things, I would be responsible for the outcomes. And we did a lot of work around the fact that I'm only in control of actions. And once I let go of being in control of outcomes, life got way, way better. So fast forward to life has gotten much better. I've gotten to come home. I'm going to meetings. I have friends. I have a group of guys that we meet in this room every other week for the last 4 years. And in COVID, I'm out for a walk in April 29th or April 27th or 6th. And I find a bag of my preferred substance while I'm walking. And there was no mental defense. There was nothing. I picked it up and I did it. And it lasted a couple days. And God bless my sponsor when we talked about it. He says, there was a bunch of stuff going on with my family. My daughter was struggling with addiction. She was really sick. We're all in a lockdown from COVID. And he pointed out to me that he goes, maybe the world doesn't have time for the Mark Show right now. Maybe everybody in your family doesn't have time to go through this all again from the beginning. How about you just jump back in and start doing what you were doing and try to make a living amends about it? And that worked for me. And I also made some basic changes. He pointed out to me some things. I'm going to talk a little bit. Okay, I've got a little bit of time about what I do today. He pointed out to me that I didn't do fellowship very well, and that was a missing component of my program. And he said, you show up for breakfast every week when you show up, but you always show up a little bit late, and you always leave some money on the table and check out early. Guys always ask what you want, if you want to do stuff with you, and you always pass. He said, next time, just say yes. I said, oh, Jesus, okay, I will. And so the next guy who asked me to do something was a guy who wanted me to go hike up a mountain. And I have no interest in being outside. I did none. So I said, okay, we're going to go to Mount Si. I called him. I said, I haven't been on a hike in like 20 years. I don't really want to go, but what do I got to do? Bring running shoes, you'll be fine. We had this magical experience. He and I have been on probably 60 or 70 hikes. We've climbed Mount Adams. We've climbed, Mount Baker. We've been all over. We've climbed down in Utah. We've met people in the program everywhere we go and do that kind of stuff. It was just a surreal experience just by saying yes. He's become one of my best friends, my venture buddy in the program. We go out and do stuff together. The other thing that I had to get over is I really didn't want to sponsor anybody. And I had a strong aversion to that until just about a year ago. And I was terrified that I was just going to fuck people up. And the sponsor that I have now, he sat down and he asked me some really, really good questions. And he said, he basically challenged me in that he goes, your experience can help somebody who's been long-term sober and been out and come back. Your experience can help people understand what the consequences are when you go out with double-digit sobriety and why you want to stay in. He said, you're denying people of that opportunity. And so he also taught me some things that I think are really valuable that I use every day when I sponsor folks. My job as a sponsor is not to tell somebody what to do, which I never do. It's not to take them through the steps or read the book with them. It's to share my experience. And if they would like to repeat my experience to try to get the outcome that they see in me, then I help them figure out how to do what I did. And that's it. So the other thing that I do, a really strong believer as I sponsor guys, is that we're doing the steps together. In other words, whatever step they're working on, I'm working on my 12th step. We have an hour to be together. We're both doing the same amount of work. We're both getting the same thing out of it, hopefully. If they don't show up, that's fine. I still get credit for doing my 12-step work. I don't have a resentment. I get to read the paper and drink an extra cup of coffee while they're not there. I don't believe in firing guys anymore. I used to. Back in the other life, I used to fire guys if they didn't do what I wanted them to do or they weren't where I wanted them to be. I don't do that anymore. I figure if a guy wants to meet with me once a month instead of once a week, which I think would help him, but he's getting something out of it, I'm not going to say no. And I just say yes when I'm asked. I got the opportunity to go. I also, as far as a AA hygiene thing, I've got some basic things that I do that I think help keep me sober. when I first came back into the program in 2017, for real, I was told I had to make my bed. There's a guy named Chris Grimm that would meet me every time I come to my home group and he asked me about making my bed, and I never had. And so I was so proud of myself when I made it the first time, and I told him yes. And he said, Mark, do you know why I asked you that? And I said, I have no idea, but it's annoying as shit. And he said, because you desperately need a win. He goes, you are so impressed with yourself. You think so much about the work you do in Olympia and all this other stuff that you do that's so important. And he goes, but you are such a lovable fuck up that if you made your bed perfectly in the morning, about 4 days out of 7, that'd be the only worthwhile thing you did. And you need a win. And so that's something that it touched me when he told me that, you know, and unfortunately Chris died a couple weeks later of a massive heart attack. He's just a wonderful guy in the program. And so I make my bed every day, even when I'm in a hotel, even when I'm traveling. It's just something I do as a routine. I have a morning routine. I have a reading that I do every day. I go to 3 to 5 meetings a week. I don't believe in meeting hopping. I go to the same meetings. I don't pick a different Monday meeting. If I'm going to Monday meeting, men's meeting, it's Seattle men's. Tuesday, I go to Knuckleheads if I go. Thursday, I go to BAM, or I go to this group that meets here. Saturday, I go to the Full Monty, and Sunday, I go to the Lodge, because it's important for me to have accountability so that the people who know me, and they see me and they can call me out when they don't see me. They ask when they haven't seen me, and I can be available to help people and see when they go through stuff. I also say yes whenever I'm asked to do something. So I've got to leave actually before I get to hear my wife speak, which she's going to love the fact I'm not here for that, because I've got a commitment after this. But I was asked to do this, and I try not to say no when I'm asked to do service. And so that's pretty much what I have. I hope this was useful to someone here, and I'm really, really grateful that you guys asked me to speak. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.